All right, Bronwyn, welcome to the Leaders Lab.
Thank you, Ken. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so Bronwyn, I know, and I just did your intro, and I know that you're a psychotherapist. Obviously, you've helped a lot of people. I know that a lot of your work is rooted in anger management. How did you stumble onto that, or where did you start? I guess first of all, I mean, how did you know you wanted to become a psychotherapist, and how did it lead you down this path?
Yeah, so I didn't know I wanted to be a therapist. My first career, and I have a master's degree prior to my counseling master's in nutrition.
Okay.
And so that was my career. But our family had to uproot during the 2008, 2009 Great Recession, and we moved away, not too far, but far enough to send me into a very, very, very dark, depressive episode where I was not functioning. And I can go into that if you're interested, but it was very bad. And I sought out therapy. My husband was afraid for me. My friends were afraid for me. So I went to a therapist. That's what everyone was saying, and I needed one. And I went to multiple. And I remember thinking in, the offices, this is back when we did in person. And I remember thinking, I'm barely functioning right now, but I'm pretty sure I would make a better therapist to me than this woman is or this man is. And that's when I started thinking, you know what? Maybe it's time to reinvent myself and go back to school and get another master's in counseling. And that was part of coming out of that depressive episode at
What
that
did
time.
what did you learn? What did you find during that episode? And how how long was it? And what did you do? I mean, you leaned into helping others and becoming a therapist yourself, but ultimately, yeah, what was the time frame, and how did you get through it?
It was the first and the most severe of probably three that I went in and out of over the next decade or so.
Mhm.
Um, but in retrospect, and I talk about this on my podcast, in retrospect, every single one of those three depressive episodes um, were due to suppressed anger that I did not know I was angry. The first time I was actually angry, and again, I was unaware of it, at my husband because we were uprooted. I was so lonely. I knew no one. I didn't have a job at that point. I just put my daughter into kindergarten. I was alone all day, every day. He would go off to work, and I was spiraling. And he felt like a million miles away. Like I didn't feel like I knew he cared, but I didn't feel like he was connecting to me. Like if he had just looked at me and said, Bronwyn, I see how much pain you're in and how lonely you are. And this
Mhm.
breaks my heart to watch. Even just saying that would have helped me feel less alone. But I felt like he was kind of like, what do I do? And kind of shooing me off to a therapist where I'm like, can you just be that person right now? Can you just, I mean, that's what our spouse is supposed to do. They're supposed to be that first person. So we don't feel alone. And he was kind of like, telling me to go off to a therapist. He didn't want anything to do with it. And so that was a betrayal of sorts, a very implicit betrayal where we have these expectations on our spouse, on our parents, on our friends and family that we don't really know that are there. And when they don't meet those expectations, it's a betrayal and we feel anger, but we are often not suppressing it intentionally, but like we're unaware of that anger or we're disassociated from it. And that's really what depression is. It's disassociation from our primary feelings, which in this case is usually anger. So that's what my first depressive episode
So in
was.
this case, it was like you were hurting, and you in whether it was conscious or somewhere in the back of your mind, it was like, look, you're supposed to be the person closest to me in the world. Why can't you just, and then fill in the blank, right? Why can't you just see me? Why can't you just show up? Why can't you? His model of it, which was probably hard to see, was probably, hey, we just moved. People do it all the time. It's for a job, right? It's not, I'm not, I don't know your husband, obviously, but, and I'm not, and in his mind, probably I'm not qualified, right? I need someone that's qualified to do this, right? And so, but so you chug along, start seeing therapists, and that doesn't really work at the beginning, yeah?
I went to a number of therapists over the 10-year span,
Yeah.
and I did not have a single positive experience with any of them. And actually, I joke that I learned everything I know now as a therapist, not in grad school. I mean, grad school, they teach you the ideologies and the principles and the theories. But I learned what not to do. And and as a person going to therapy and needing a good therapist, I knew what I needed. And so, and that wasn't met for me. So all of that has influenced what I know today and how I am a therapist.
So a lot of this came through, hey, I'm not really getting what I need externally. I better figure it out myself. And you're getting the education on the meantime. What were some of the key things that you saw, in your profession, that you said, okay, I know what not to do? Or any of those stand out right now still that you'd be like, yeah, I'm never doing that?
Yeah. So, and again, I have a lot of clients coming to me and they've had previous therapists, and some of them are very aware that the previous therapist wasn't good. And some of them are just kind of like, yeah, I went to this therapist for like 2.5 years. And I'm like, did it help? Well, yeah. And I'm like, well, why are you still seeking therapy if it helped? So some of them don't know how bad it was. Some of them are aware of it, but for the most part, there's the therapists who just listen, and that's all they do is just go, uh-huh, mm, yeah,
What do you
wow.
think about that? How does
Yeah,
that
or
make you feel? Yeah,
yeah. And those aren't bad questions, but that's kind of the end of it.
right.
So you probably know about those therapists. And then there's the other side of the spectrum with today's modalities, which supposedly are evidence-based, but they're not. CBT is cognitive behavioral therapy. So those therapists don't listen at all. They listen for like 5, 10 minutes and they're already telling you how to make a behavioral change. Like, well, you're depressed, Bronwyn, and you should go out with friends more, or you should exercise. Like, wow, I couldn't have just gone on the computer and figured that out for myself. Like, why do I need a human being? No, I need a human being to listen, to understand, to deep listening, because deep listening requires really getting to know, like, there's so many layers to each person, and to really understand why I'm depressed, you need to know my backstory. You need to know my experience that I'm not aware of. And by listening and by me talking, I'm actually becoming aware of my own experience. A lot of clients will be like, I'm just now, while I'm talking, I'm just now thinking about this. Like, I've never thought of this before. And that's part of the job, is to do this together as a team, to collaborate, understanding, to glean wisdom, insight, and to really understand ourselves and to unlearn a lot of the things that we have implicitly learned in our childhood.
When I've noticed, again, anger seems to be the thing that ran true for you, where it was like, okay, this is repressed anger. That's then manifest, or because it can't manifest itself, it's coming out in other ways, right? Whether that's depression, whether that's acting out, whatever it is for the individual. Did you have like an epiphany moment where, like, during your study of both yourself and of the material, where you were like, God, I really think this anger is kind of the thing. Like, I keep coming back to it. Like, was there a moment where that really took hold?
Kind of slowly, and actually very recently. So, and I'll give you an example. So, and it keeps getting like reinforced. This is the funny part. So, not only is depression from suppressed or disassociated anger, but anxiety is as well. Panic attacks, mania, psychosis, like kind of every mental illness is the result of disassociated anger, anger that we're not aware of, that we don't feel entitled to feel, right?
Right.
And so I kind of was getting an inkling of this, but then in retrospect, kind of looking back at my depressive episodes, the really severe ones, each one was someone betrayed me. So the first one was my husband. The second one was a supervisor where I started my internship, who was a therapist who I really thought I could trust. I couldn't. He betrayed me. I didn't feel entitled to get angry and say, hey, you know what? If you're not honoring and respecting my boundaries and my limitations, then I'll get an internship somewhere else. So I didn't feel entitled to say or do that. So that would have been an expression of my anger, knowing it's valid and we express it through boundaries and through assertiveness. And then the last one was a betrayal by a friend that really misunderstood me, and I felt very abandoned by her. Um, so looking back at that, but also I recently, my latest podcast episode is a story of my own daughter and myself and our relationship. She's 20 now. And when we moved and when I fell into that pit of depression, I made her feel abandoned.
Sure.
I made her feel betrayed. She was 5, but if anyone's been around someone who's depressed, it's like they're kind of dead. It's like losing someone who's still alive in body. And all of a sudden, as a 5-year-old, her mom wasn't making eye contact with her. Her mom wasn't asking her about her experience of the move because she
Hmm.
lost her whole world. She lost
Hmm.
even our dog, which was like her sibling and her friends. And I wasn't attuned to her whatsoever suddenly. And it was like I was dead inside. And she felt very rejected by me. And for the next, honestly, 14 years, we had a very contentious relationship where I felt like she was my enemy and she was like always rejecting me because she had felt rejected by me. And so it was this tense, crazy relationship. But so recently, in the last 6 months, I came to really realize like that's actually what happened. Like
Yeah.
that's why she has seen me as her enemy all these years. During those 14 years, she had a lot of anxiety and she would have chronic stomach aches and headaches that she did not have until that period of our move. She was totally healthy and happy. And so when I finally came clean and I apologized to her and owned that I had indeed abandoned her emotionally, and told her, I want to win back your trust. I own this. That was so bad. I didn't excuse myself. She knew. And when I finally did that and we reconciled where we are today, her headaches, her stomach aches, her anxiety are no more.
Yeah,
Like no
because
more.
she's just holding it in before like yeah, and it impacts. Have you worked with people in recovery before? Because one thing that just keeps like lining up here with me is resentments are kind of the first step back into using again for people, and resentments and anger or, probably very close cousins, I would think, right? And, you know, what's interesting about this too is the anger or the resentment, at least what I've learned in my own journey, it doesn't matter if it's justified. It doesn't matter if it's even accurate. It matters that it's true to you and that if you don't deal with it, right? Like, so sometimes I bring up a resentment and I go, "Oh God, that's been bugging me all these years." You know what I mean? Like because it hasn't come to the surface. There's no way to reconcile it. So there's something that could have happened when I'm 5 years old, 8 years old, 10 years old. Something with my parents where I'm like, wait a minute, what is this really? Like, this isn't who they are today, and it's certainly not who I am today. It's just something that happened when I was a child or at some point in my life that became part of my story and became like a fact, became part of my belief system.
Yes.
And it may be true and it may not be true anymore, right? But we haven't even looked at it anymore. It's just part of our wiring. It's sort of like your daughter goes, well, my mom abandoned me when I was 5 emotionally, which sounds like it was probably accurate, at least for your guys' situation. Does that mean you've abandoned her now? No. So you're looking at it going, why are you still acting this way? Like, I've been there completely for you the last several years, right? But she's still holding on to this thing that she can't even identify from back then. Yeah.
Yeah, that you're speaking to something very important, I think, to flesh out, which, so many people, even therapists, so many therapists will be like, tell my daughter, your mom didn't mean to, and she was depressed and give her slack. And it's like we're talking people out of their feelings. That
Right.
doesn't work.
Right.
That doesn't work because
Right.
I'm sure my daughter would have talked herself out of her feelings if that were even possible. She
Right.
knew intellectually that I didn't mean to abandon her. She knew intellectually, especially as she got older, you were so depressed. Like I remember that now. Like I see it.
Right.
But our intellect, what we know up here and what like little Edie, that's her name, what 5-year-old Edie experienced are very different things. And we cannot talk people out of their feelings. So, what I had to do is, I wrote a letter to her called Dear 5-year-old Edie, and it was an apology letter. And, we really need to go. And so I do work with like our inner child to talk to little Edie and say, you know what, you were right that to feel abandoned, because
Right.
it was an abandonment. It was not intentional, but it was, and apologize. And so same with you, Ken, like little Ken, we can't talk him out of his feelings. We just have to say, yeah, little Ken, you have every right to be angry. That did feel like an abandonment or a rejection or a betrayal. And we need to help him, work that out. And what does he need? Maybe he does need like an admission from his parents that that wasn't okay, and that
Right.
they're now, sorry looking back that that wasn't the best choice.
How about on the I don't know if I call it the patient side, but on the person,
Mhm.
like in this case, maybe you're on your daughter's side, or maybe just taking something more generically. Let's say on the person feeling the wound, right? Feeling the whatever it is, call it a betrayal, call it a whatever it was that has now been compounded over the years, and it's addressed. When you're working with people, because I find that sometimes, and I am not close to being a psychotherapist, but when I'm talking to people, I feel like a lot of times people have trouble letting go of, even if someone comes clean, of letting go of the story. Sometimes, you know what I mean? Like it's. I'll give an example, personal
Okay.
example. So my mom also battled depression, and there was a lot of pretty dark stuff and suicide attempts and stuff like that. And at a certain point in my life, as an adult, I decided that you know I need to compartmentalize this, and you're going to be over here, and I might call you a few times a year, but we're not really going to have an emotional relationship, right? And
Yeah.
I'll tell you a story real quick relating back. So in my head, what I was saying to myself is, well, my mom's just out there. We can't loop her in. I'm raising my own kids now, and I've got to keep them safe and keep them grounded and all of that. And this just doesn't have a place in my
Mhm.
life anymore, right? Along with that, I remember I was at a seminar, and we were kind of going into a bit of a group hypnosis in a way, and we were going back to what our oldest childhood memory was.
Mhm.
And this will relate back to my mom here in a minute. But now, for by the time I did this hypnosis thing, I had for years said, "Well, my mom was just kind of a train wreck. She went off the deep end. She was addicted to, prescription drugs and alcohol and whatever, right?" And we go to this thing, and they said, "Go back to your oldest childhood memory." And most people, when you say that, they've got something in mind, right? That they've been repeating to themselves.
Mhm.
And for me, I'm legally blind in my left eye, was from birth. I had to have surgery when I was like 3 years old. And they
Mhm.
actually had to, while I was awake, they had to do a local anesthetic to remove my eyeball from my head and do something to the nerve. And when I
Wow.
talk about that, people go, "What was that experience like?" And I always, because it's my own model of the world, I was like, "Oh, I was a champ. I didn't even cry. I was so strong," and this and that.
Mhm.
But in this hypnosis thing, they made us go back, and they said, "Well, what was the memory right before that?" Because there's always something, right? And they were trying to get you to go deeper into your childhood memories. And all of a sudden, I was like, "Oh, I was calm, but I was calm because the whole car ride before that, which I didn't even have access to until that moment, my mom was just being the epitome of everything a mother should be in terms of prepping me for that moment, right? And what it was going to be like, and just being the most
Mhm.
nurturing, caring, understanding person." And then they took me back again, and I realized that for weeks and months, my mom had just been doing all this work to prep me for like what was going to happen and the potential loss of my eye and all of this. But I wouldn't let it in
Mhm.
until that moment because it didn't support the story I kept telling myself about who my mom was now. Does that make
Mhm.
sense?
Yeah.
So I think so. I guess where I'm getting to with this, or if there's a question in this, is it more when you're working with people, is there an attachment to the old stories that prevent them sometimes, even when they can recognize the anger, I would assume that's kind of the next step is like, how do you reconcile it, right? How do you let go of the attachment to what that means? Does that make sense?
Well, yeah. I guess I would see it as, here's what I would say. And again, Ken, like this is all you've shared. So there's a lot more obviously to your story, but
Sure.
no one is all good or all bad.
Right.
And we have to integrate ourselves, but we also have to integrate other people in our eyes, and in childhood, we do make a parent all bad if they're hurting us on a
Right.
regular basis. It's a defense mechanism to make them all bad so we can't get hurt anymore. Right. And so if you have these memories of her really being a nurturing, attuning, caring mother, that's beautiful. But, just from that brief story, it sounds like you had to make her all bad because there was so much bad. And if that and that's really valid. Like that's really
Sure.
informative and that's important to hold on to. Not we can integrate who she is, and that's what it sounds like you want to do today. But if she's still repeating the harmful things and she hasn't won back your trust, then those boundaries, those hard and fast boundaries that you referred to with that you've placed in your own life are valid too.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And she passed like, 20 plus
Mhm.
years ago now, but um I guess what it did for me was it shone a light on the story I had been telling myself. First of all, the feelings I agree are completely valid, and there was a point where boundaries were absolutely necessary for where I was in the world and where she was and what I was trying to do right with my life, and those boundaries were were needed. But going back and looking at it, it's like okay, but I was looking at it. It's almost like seeing a traffic accident that
Mhm.
happens at a four-way stop, but reporting about it from one corner instead of
Sure.
all four, right? It was like,
Yeah.
okay, all those things are true. And I don't really have to be pissed off about it anymore. First of all, she was troubled. There was some stuff going on. There was, stuff that she had from her background and everything else. And it's not the whole story. It's
It's not the
it's
whole story.
true and it's part of the
Yeah.
story, but there's all this other stuff like that she
Yeah.
was really kind at times and she did do all these great things, right? And that helped me I guess kind of solve the resentment, you know what I mean, or the anger
Well,
and be
but
able
but
to appreciate her.
yeah, and that's good to integrate her, to see her more fully and wholly. But I would say, what matters is what did little Ken learn through a mother like that he now needs to unlearn? Because us getting whole and us becoming integrated in ourselves is the best way to honor our parents, whether they're alive or dead, whether they want us to or not. Like the best way we can honor them is become full flourishing adults. And so whatever little Ken learned from that kind of mother, and usually what we learn with a mother who is inconsistent at best with their nurturing and their
Hmm.
attunement for us, is we learn that we don't matter, or we learn that we are inherently bad or shameful because of
Right.
their inconsistency with us, that something is inherently bad with us. That's what kids always pick up. Oh, it's me. I'm bad. Right. And so we take that within us throughout our lives, and it's there until our dying day, unless we own it, unless we become aware of it and we do something about it to unlearn it. And so I walk my clients through what's called I call it now an integration exercise. So to, I would pick, and I do this in my podcast too with my co-host. I do one with her, but we envision, little Ken when he was feeling neglect from his mom. So we pick a memory that's kind of emblematic of that. And I'll say, like, what was the look on his face? Well, maybe it was just like feeling very alone and
Hmm.
very like ashamed, right? And so I'd walk you through, like, let's have adult Ken now enter that memory and say to little Ken, little Ken, I know you feel alone and I know you feel rejected right now. But what I need you to know is that that was a her problem. That was a mom problem,
Hmm.
not a you problem.
Right.
And I'm here now and I will attune to you consistently. And I want you to see what I see when I look at you, which is a precious little boy who has so much value and worth. And It doesn't come from what he does. There's nothing he can add to it. There's nothing he can detract from it. And I will be here to be a mirror to you, to reflect back to you your value and your worth to me from here on out. And I will attune to you consistently. I will meet your needs and I will respect your limitations.
No, that's cool. So when you're working with people, are you usually when they come to you, I guess first of all, are you working with all ages, demographics, or is there a certain area that you focus on?
Um, yeah, so I just work with individuals. I don't work with couples anymore. I've learned that the hard way. I'm not sure I believe in couples therapy at this juncture. Actually, I think there's so much we can do with the individual that can, bleed into the couple or the relationship that's really powerful. And I do work with teens as well.
Okay. And so when they first come to you, are you on maybe I'm phrasing it the wrong way, but are you on like a quest to go, okay, what is the underlying anger? What is the underlying resentment? Is that kind of where you're at? Is like let me do some investigating and find out where
Hmm. I
yeah.
mean, I have an agenda. That's what I'm looking for. So
Yeah.
it's so interesting. We depict in our society depression, anxiety, panic attacks as just like where do they come from? Like, did you catch it when you went to the grocery store? Did you catch a bout of depression?
Sure.
No one like it's kind of like modern medicine where did you catch the diabetes? Like, where did you catch like
Yeah.
where let's look at the root. Let's look at the root cause. Let's stop managing symptoms, which unfortunately is what so many therapists do. Is all they do is they manage the external symptoms and they don't look at what the root is. Like, let's get rid of the root. Let's like undo it,
Right.
and that way the symptoms will be gone forever. So I'm always looking for the root. The root is always relational. It is always relational. It's always a betrayal or an abandonment, which kind of go hand in hand, by someone that we love or that we expect to come through for us, that we have an expectation of. So it's not someone cutting us off on the freeway. That's anger, but that's not a betrayal because we don't
Right.
have an expectation, much expectation of the people on the freeway. It's from someone who can betray us, someone we're trusting, right?
So it's normally a close relationship or whether that be a relative, a friend or whatever.
Yeah.
What I mean in terms of the stages of I guess progression of the anger, so it starts with I'm angry. That's maybe causing me to act out in certain ways. That then what leads to depression, which can lead to psychosis, or is it not
Oh,
always
if they're angry and they're acting out, they're angry. And that actually to me is
not a
like,
bad thing necessarily, right?
well, the acting out part is, but if
Right,
they're in touch with their anger,
right.
that is a good start. Most people are not in touch. And so what I say, people will say, I'm not an angry person. Okay. To me, that's like saying I'm not a breathing person.
Yeah,
Because,
yeah.
like, we all have anger. You
Hmm.
know, we have anger, whether you called it resentment, whether we call it betrayal, disappointment, frustration, irritation, all these things. Um, they're all anger. And we have that whenever the real deviates from the ideal. And, living on planet Earth, that's 23 hours a day on a good day.
Sure.
So that's just like living and being human on planet Earth. We're going to get frustrated and disappointed and feel betrayed. Like that's normal. That's normal and valid. So we're all angry. We all have anger. But it's about our relationship to our anger. And we need to
Right.
have a healthy relationship to it. And a lot of us were taught as children, don't be angry. It's evil. It's shameful. It's bad. It's sinful or whatever. Or we see a parent who's like so flagrantly angry all the time that we don't need anyone to tell us not to show our anger because it all we see is violent, verbally violent, or even violent anger. And so we learn implicitly, don't be angry, keep it inside. So we develop a relationship to our anger that's usually not healthy, either blowing up or suppressing it. And my goal is to help people it starts with just going, you know what? It's okay to feel angry. It is
Right.
totally okay to feel it. That doesn't make me an angry person. That just makes me human. And I start with going, you know what, Ken? we said we're going to meet at 8 and you showed up at 8:15. Like, it's okay for me to feel frustrated. And then what do I do with that? I can use my words. That's what adults do. They use their words. So not insinuation, not manipulation. They use their words. And I would say, Ken, that's frustrating. That's me channeling my anger. Ken,
Right.
that's frustrating when I have to wait 15 minutes. That's it.
Right.
And then if, you repeat it over and over and you keep doing that, then a boundary. So assertive speech and boundaries. That's how we channel our anger. That's how we have a healthy relationship to it.
I know you've done some podcasts on how this applies kind of in the workforce, and how can leaders take a subject like this and I guess use it effectively in the workplace.
Yeah, so that's a great question. I would say one preemptive approach that would be awesome to see any kind of leader do is to like institutionalize a regular gripe session. So
Mhm.
to bring people together, whether they're other leaders under them, whatever, and like have them meet at a regular time and be like, let's just all air our grievances. Let's share our frustration. That's the whole point of this. Because when we do that, when we let other people have a voice, whether it's our children, and families can do this. We can have a weekly family gripe session where we let our kids voice their own frustrations with us
Mhm.
and with each other and with the whole situation. And doing that what that does, letting them have a voice, says to them, you matter. You can even your anger is not, it's not threatening to me. I'm not going to reject you. I'm not going to defend myself because your anger matters. It's valid. I want to hear it. And therefore you matter. And when we do that with our coworkers, our employees, they have a natural, like, they want to be a part. They naturally have a buy-in. They want to be
Sure.
engaged, feel like I'm a part of this. I'm in a collaborative relationship. Maybe it's not 100% democratic, but it is collaborative. And when we do that with our children, it teaches them you matter.
Yeah.
And we inherently do that for our children. They take that into the world. They will never forget that they matter. And they will not put up with the abusive boss because they know that they matter. They will not stay in the abusive relationship because they know implicitly that they matter. And we've taught them that, not by telling them you matter, by showing them that, by saying, I get you're angry with me, Johnny. You have every right to be, because that was a really stupid thing of me to say.
Sure. And I think as bosses, it's everybody talks about being approachable or an open door policy, but it's not just being approachable. The sunshines and rainbows and butterflies, and there's frankly no progress in that really anyway, right? Like I mean, I guess I'd stop short of saying you probably celebrate anger, but in a way, right? Because getting it out or verbalizing it is the first step in going, hey, great. I mean, now there's at least a conversation happening that's going to lead to something better than you just having these repressed feelings. And if that's someone on our team, what it's going to show up as is what do they call it? Like it's not. It's like absenteeism, but when you're there, basically, like they're
Passive
doing,
aggressiveness. Yeah, for
yeah,
sure.
or they're
Yeah.
just like going through the motions at work. They're present, but they're absent at the same time. They don't care anymore because they don't feel like you care about them, because you kind of don't. Like if you're not making an effort to really hear them when they need to be heard, and you're only hearing about them when they have good things to report, then what does that really say about your relationship? It's more like, hey, you're a commodity. When you have good things to report, then you're in good shape, and if you have bad things to report, then you're not. Now, there's always a time and a place, but I think it is up to the leader to create the time and the place, right? So that there is a way to get that stuff out.
Yeah, I think that would be so wise. And to see people's individual frustration as something not to defend against, but like, this is valid, this is real. Let's resolve it together.
Yeah.
Let's participate together in how we can resolve this. And that's going to make the whole workplace a better place. It's going to make it a safe environment. It's going to make it a very collaborative and dynamic environment. And those employees are going to give their all.
Yeah. No, agreed. And I think one thing we've tried to institute, because some people are totally okay in a group setting with saying, hey, I think we're doing this wrong, or this needs to happen, or communication between this person hasn't been great. And then there's other people who even if you've tried to really lay the foundation and groundwork for it being a open environment, that they're just going to be a little more like hush hush in that kind of an environment. And I think as leaders or as parents or whatever, that we need to recognize that and approach them maybe on a one-on-one basis or whatever, but still give them
Yeah.
that opportunity. Yeah.
Yeah.
So cool. So, tell me, when people start working with you, like you said, it's generally one-on-one right now, and you're also, you've recorded a lot of episodes of your podcast. It looked like already. How often is that coming out?
Yeah, whenever I have enough content and it's almost like, oh my God, I got to do this now. I have so much content.
Yeah.
And it's just crazy. Like the content will come to me the more I work with my own clients and I see these, I start to see things like these new dynamics. Oh, we haven't talked about this. So the last one I just recorded on Sunday or Saturday was just, one of the things is just talking about being responsible to other people, but not for other people, especially
Mm-hmm.
for their feelings,
Mm-hmm.
right? And there's just so many people who want us to feel responsible for their feelings, and we're
Sure.
not. We're responsible to them. And so, kind of like the differences in that, and how powerful it is. Like, so let's say an example would be, um, let's say I'm a waitress and I have a customer who's asking for their favorite off menu item that they usually have. And that day it doesn't exist. So I say, or it's not there. And I say, oh, yeah, we don't have that today. And let's say the customer rolls their eyes at me. So that customer wants me to feel responsible for his feelings. He's
Right.
using nonverbal cues to make me feel, usually to evoke feelings of guilt. So, and it's manipulative in nature because he probably wants me to be like, oh, well, we can do this
Let
special
me see what I could
accommodation,
do. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And so for me as a wait person, for me just to remind myself, you know what, Bronwyn? You are not responsible for his feelings. You're
Right.
responsible to him, but not for him. And he's trying to make you feel responsible for his feelings, but you're not. And then to check in with myself, I am responsible for my feelings. What am I feeling? I'm feeling kind of irked that this guy, is kind of manipulative, pulling a manipulative move right now. So what am I feeling? I'm feeling a little frustrated. So what do I need? Because our feelings tell us our needs. And that's why it's imperative that we self-attune, that we check in with what we're feeling. I'm feeling this frustration. So I need to say, sir, I see how disappointed you are, but nothing I can do.
Yeah. It is
If
what it
you like,
is.
I can go away and I can come back when you're ready to order. So that would be like an assertive act that where I am not betraying myself in the process. Because when we betray ourselves and become responsible for other people's feelings, we're not being responsible for our own because you can't do both. It's an either
Right.
or. And
Right.
so I'm now betraying myself. And every time we do that, we end up getting like anxious or depressed, like pretty much every time.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Because if every time someone around you isn't getting everything they need, and that's dictating my feelings, I'm going to be upset all the time. And that's the definition of like a codependency trap, right? It's like,
very
oh
codependent.
God, like, how can I make this right? And it's like, look, I'm like, the part about being responsible to him is the part that I'm still here. I'm your waitress. I'll give you a minute. Sorry, that wasn't available. I know it's probably going to take you a couple of minutes now to make up your mind, and I'll come back, and I can just let it go at that point, right? I'm
Yes.
still serving him. I'm still doing a great job, but I'm not really attached to an outcome that I can't control anyway, right? So that's really cool.
Yeah, actually, so we talk about boundaries, and I love how the boundaries word has really entered the American vernacular. I love that. I'm in my 50s, so that hasn't always been there. Like
Right.
boundaries was like a new word until I don't know, 15 years ago maybe. So I love that, but the most important boundary is this invisible one, which is a feelings boundary, which is,
Yeah.
you know, this invisible boundary. Ken, you're responsible for your feelings and I'm responsible for mine. And that's this boundary that we don't see. And we need to acknowledge it because most of my clients are codependent and they do suffer from feeling responsible for other people, on an ongoing basis.
Right. No, I feel like I feel like a huge percentage of the population suffers from that, because we're connected, right? And we care about other people, and you can do all those things and still have these guardrails or boundaries at the same time, right? That say I don't need to go there. And going back to the workplace, it's it would be like if I was a sales manager for a company and someone's performance isn't there and they're upset about X, Y, and Z. It's like I can empathize without attaching to it, right? I can also empathize and give direction because I'm there to serve them. I am responsible to them. I'm
Yes.
not responsible to own their feelings in this situation. And even to a point, we had to let someone go on our team recently. And I had a couple of young leaders that I had involved in the decision making of that because I wanted them to understand that it actually is not our job to make people successful. It's their job to make themselves successful. It's our job to create an environment that
Mhm.
allows the people that are ready to be successful, right? But at the end of the day, it's almost like you can lead a horse to water, right? They still got to drink. I mean,
Yeah,
and that was something that was really hard for me early in my leadership career because it was like, no, I hired you. You will be successful, right? Like I will will it, and it's like you can't. Um, you
right.
just can't.
Well,
And even though
yeah,
I'm equating it to work, it's
yeah,
even the same with kids and stuff. It just becomes tougher, right? It's like I'm going to do the best I can, but at
that's
the
right.
end of the day, you're your own person, and you still got to make it happen.
Well, and then I think when we're talking about this, one thing that's really important to keep into perspective that most people we don't is that a failure is not all bad.
No,
Remember we talked about no one's all bad or all good. Nothing is in fact all bad. I have come to the place where I see everything as bittersweet. So you and I have both made failures in our lives. In
sure,
retrospect, looking back, was it all bad? It felt all bad at the time. Yeah, but it wasn't because I learned and it gave me an opportunity. Each failure, each painful experience is an opportunity. And so if we have to like say, tell someone, sorry, this isn't working, it feels all bad, but we need to keep in mind it's not there. Everything in life is a double-edged sword. Every
sure.
blessing has a curse attached to it. Every curse has a
Mhm.
blessing, and there's so much more, and we need to keep that in perspective.
Absolutely. And I think part of that is trusting the universe a little bit or God or whatever someone believes in, right? That this is all kind of, like you said, it's not all one way or the other. To me, it's more of a flow. And it's like, all just can we just flow with it, but well, amazing. It's been great talking with you. I can't believe we've come to the end of our episode already because we could go another 45 minutes, I'm sure. But a pleasure to meet you. We're gonna be sure to the name of your podcast again. I was listening to it earlier, but remind
Yeah,
me, please.
it's angry at the right things.
Okay, cool. Angry at the right things. And so we're going to put oh, it's right in front of me. There it is. I could have read it. Anyway, we'll put a link to your show and all the ways to get in contact with you. But thanks so much. It's been really insightful and I enjoyed meeting you, Bronwyn.
You too, Ken. Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks. Take care.